They will know we are Christians by our love, by our love. Yes, they'll know we are Christians by our love. So if I had a nickel for every time I sang that song, I'd probably have about $20 by now. I started going to church before I can even remember. My brother and I, he's a year and 9 days younger. That 9 days is important. And we would get up early and try to be quiet on Sunday mornings so that my mom would not wake up and take us to church. It never worked. She would always wake up and we would always go to church. And as I grew, when I got to about junior high, high school, going to church, and actually more than that, faith became my own. So I got baptized when I was 14. I joined all the youth groups. And one of my favorite things about the youth group was retreats, right? You get to go away, hang out, and when you're in high school, just hanging out with your friends, singing, right, the song around the campfire. And it was sitting around the campfire that I would just feel so connected to my family, to my friends, to my life, to God. And I could never imagine a time that I wouldn't feel that connection. And I never imagined a time where I am right now. 30 years later, I haven't been to church for 5 years. And it's something I think about quite a bit. Because if my faith was so important to me, how could I just leave it behind? Right? I went to Bible college. I memorized verses. I was a true believer. And yet, here I am today. So, not that long ago, my daughter, her name is Carissa, we had a conversation in the car. And I think you have a lot of good conversations in the car with kids because they're held captive, right? And the one thing you need to know about Carissa is she's the youngest out of 3 and she hates it. She hates being the youngest. She wants to be the oldest. She wants to go to bed late. She wants to stay up and have responsibilities. And she keeps asking me still today for a younger sibling. I'm like, no, we're not doing that. And so she said to me, Mom, you know, I know I'm only 9, but it's almost my birthday, so how about we just call it 10? Okay, we'll call it 10. And then her next question was, Mommy, do you know that in the Bible it says you need to love others like you love yourself? I mean, she's only, let's call it 10, so she doesn't know all of the things. She doesn't know I went to Bible college. She doesn't know that I've memorized verses and I can recite things. And right, all she knows is that her mom doesn't go to church with her. And she's so worried that we're not going to be in heaven together when we die. So this question is not out of the scope of things to expect, right? We've had these kind of conversations before. And what happened was, I asked her back. I said, I do know that it says that in the Bible. I said, so how do you love yourself? And I'm like, oh, that's a good question. I like that question. Had a little bit of a braingasm, right? And she looked at me blankly. I mean, really, it's not a fair question for a, let's call it 10-year-old. Because we'll just call me 40. And I don't always have a good question or a good answer for that, right? So she said, well, you love yourself by loving other people. I'm like, oh, braingasm. Because that's exactly what I had been doing. And it's a good thing Mark's here, because he can talk. I've never come twice before, Mark, so we can talk about that later. And it's true. I had spent my life trying to love myself by loving others. And it was a value exchange that didn't work. If I give you this, then you'll love me, right? If I help you, then you'll accept me, right? And the answer was always no. And so the formula didn't work. So I had to stop. Part of the transition from going to church to not going to church is I don't stay in touch with many people from church. But one person I do stay in touch with is Pastor David. He is the pastor at the church I used to go to and the pastor where my kids and my ex-husband still go. So he knows us. He knows us pretty good. So I was telling him about this car conversation. And I said, David, how do you love yourself? He paused too. And he said, oh, well, I'd rather rely on what God tells me about myself than what I think about myself. And I understood exactly what he meant, because that's exactly what I had been taught. The Bible is full of verses about how much God loves you and how special you are, right? Psalm 139, we are knit together in our mother's womb. For me, though, those two ideas were different. What God thought about me and what I thought about me were different. And for him, they were the same. And so as we jostled back and forth with this idea, I had another braingasm. And it was the idea that I thought of myself so poorly that what God thought about me didn't even matter. And so I learned that I may not be able to say that loving yourself is never taught at church, because maybe it was and maybe I didn't hear it. But what I did learn is that I wouldn't hear it from David, and I wouldn't learn it at that church. And so people ask, are you going to go back to church? You ever going to go back? I'm like, I don't know. I've learned to never say never. And so maybe I will go back. And like, it's ironic, right? Remember that song I started with? That Christians are love? It's ironic that I had to leave the church to find love for myself. And I did. And it's not a path I would have chosen, but it's something I do not regret at all, because I love it. I love the self-love. And so if I go back, my mission field is in the church, and I get to teach people how to love themselves. Thank you.